The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Asian shares were mixed on Tuesday as Israel urges residents of Iran's capital to evacuate. Israel warns the 300,000 people in the middle of Tehran should leave as its air campaign on the capital appears to broaden on the fourth day of an intensifying conflict. Japan's Nikkei 225 and Singapore's Straits Times are currently in the green, while China's Shanghai Composite, Hong Kong's Hang Seng, Australia's ASX 200 and South Korea's Kospi are in negative territory. In the currency markets, the US dollar fell only against the Japanese yen, while it remained flat against the Hong Kong dollar. Global markets showed mixed movement across commodities and cryptocurrencies. Gold edged slightly lower while oil prices climbed, led by gains in West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude. In contrast, Dubai crude posted a decline. In the cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin fell by more than 1%, while Ethereum dropped over 3%. Iran state media reports 2 people were killed in Israel's attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting. The attack came during a live broadcast, forcing a news anchor to leave her desk due to dust and debris caused by the strike. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered a surprise strike on Iran early Friday, vowing to end Tehran's nuclear program, which he calls a threat to his country. In response, Iran has launched nightly ballistic missile barrages, escalating the conflict and raising global risks for energy markets and security. 14 Filipino workers in the south of Tel Aviv got emergency aid from the Department of Migrant Workers after surviving an Iranian missile strike. 4 other Filipinos were hospitalized, 1 in critical condition. Of the 14 uninjured survivors, 8 went to a safe house, 5 stayed with employers, and 1 chose to stay with a friend. The DMW is working with the Philippine Embassy in Tel Aviv to provide the basic needs of the affected OFWs. Malacanang says President Bongbong Marcos will thoroughly evaluate the proposed Konektadong Pinoy bill once it reaches his desk. This amid concerns raised by telecommunications companies over potential national security and competition risks. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president is aware of public interest and potential sectoral issues arising from the bill, which is part of the administration's priority legislative agenda. Telecoms firms have warned some provisions in the bill may weaken government regulatory powers and potentially threaten market fairness and national security. The bill, which was ratified by Congress last week, aims to expand internet access in the country by easing the entry of new players. President Bongbong Marcos is putting government reports under the microscope, determined to see if they truly reflect what's happening with public projects. In his latest podcast episode, Marcos admits some reports are misleading, not showing the full picture. But he also says many others give an honest account of the on-the-ground reality.
It's very different to receive, makatanggap ka ng report na sasabihin, natapos namin yung project, ganito yung ginastos namin, may picture na maganda. Pero pag pinuntahan mo, iba. Iba talaga. Totoo pala yung report, maganda yung report. Alam mo na, yung taong yun, hindi nagsisinungaling sa'yo. The other side is, binuhala ako nitong mga lokon to. Alam mo na, eto mga to, hindi reliable yan. Maghanap tayo ng iba. So it's still important to go and see things for yourself.
Aboitiz Infra Capital takes full control of the Bohol-Panglao International Airport under a 30-year deal. The infrastructure arm of the Aboitiz Group starts with a 4.53 billion peso investment to raise the airport's annual capacity by 25% to 2.5 million passengers in 2 years. Improvements include terminal expansion, advanced aviation systems, and facility upgrades. By 2030, target capacity is 3.9 million yearly, driving tourism and economic growth in Bohol and the Visayas. Aboitiz Infra Capital also manages the international airports in Laguindingan and Mactan, Cebu. The total revenues of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority, or BCDA, triples to more than 20 billion pesos in 2024. This is higher than 7.3 billion pesos recorded in 2023 and also surpasses the earlier projection of 11 billion. BCDA attributes the revenue growth to multiple income streams led by gains from a joint venture agreement with a private developer amounting to 13.9 billion pesos. 100 Chinese or Chinese nationals involved in pogos are deported to Shanghai. They were arrested in past raids in Cebu, Cavite, Parañaque, and Pasay City as part of law enforcement operations targeting scam hubs. The government says their deportation is part of an intensified campaign to remove foreign nationals engaged in illicit online gaming and scamming operations. We're taking a short break. More business stories are up next. You're watching Business Brief. Violence in the Middle East show no signs of easing, and it could affect the Philippine economy. Sujin Kim spoke with 3 of the country's top economists. He joins us on the line for the details. Sujin.
Inflation risks are rising for the Philippines as global oil prices surge amid the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. Our CBC chief economist Mike Ricafort noted that every $10 increase in oil prices could add around 0.2 to 0.3 percentage points to the country's headline inflation. Analyst Jonathan Ravelas warned that if the conflict persists for several months, year-end inflation could edge closer to 2.5%, still within the central bank's 2 to 4% target, but higher than earlier projections. Oil prices have risen from around $63 to $64 per barrel before the latest tensions to nearly $72 per barrel as of this week. Both Ravelas and Ricafort warned that if supply from the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted further, prices could reach the $80 level. The Philippines, which imports nearly all of its oil, is highly vulnerable. The country buys about 500,000 barrels of oil per day. According to Ricafort's estimates, a $10 hike in oil prices could add around $5 million in daily import costs, or about $150 million per month. The peso has weakened, now trading at 56.60 to the dollar, compared to 55 levels a few weeks ago. BDO Capital President Ed Francisco said the peso could face additional pressure if the conflict persists, potentially exceeding the House forecast of 56 for year-end. Meanwhile, economists pointed out that capital is moving into safer assets such as the US dollar, yen, gold, and fixed income securities. According to Francisco, interest in Philippine equities remains subdued, with most local investors focused on fixed income. This could help limit further downside for the Philippine Stock Exchange Index, which has been trading in the low 6,000 levels. Overall, the outlook will depend heavily on whether the Middle East tensions de-escalate and oil supply routes remain open. And those are latest updates from Taguig City. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you for that report, Sujin Kim. Russia's war in Ukraine and Trump's tariffs take center stage in the G7 meetings in Canada. Russia has been a thorny issue as some European nations want Trump to back tougher sanctions against Moscow. But the U.S. president has openly expressed support for Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in. And I would say that that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in. And you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago.
Why not have China here, the biggest economy in the world after the United States?
Well, it's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. If somebody wants to suggest China coming in, I think we suggest. But you want to have people that you can talk to. You know, they don't talk to. Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8. as I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted.
Trump has left the summit early to rush back to Washington. He has ordered his team to try to set up a meeting with Iranian officials as quickly as possible. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and President Donald Trump failed to agree on a trade deal on Monday, which would have lowered or eliminated U.S. tariffs. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the G7 Leaders Summit in the Canadian Rockies. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, Ishiba said there are still issues where he and Trump remain divided. He added that Japan will do everything it can in protecting national interests that include its automobile industry.
Japan and the U.S. have been continuing honest discussions, and we've been exploring the possibility of a deal down to the wire. But there are still points where our views remain divided, so there is no package-wide deal made. For our country, for example, automobiles are a major national interest. We will continue to do everything we can to protect such interests.
Ishiba and Trump will have another chance to meet at the NATO summit in The Hague next week. China's President Xi Jinping and Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev met in Astana on Monday to boost trade and investment ties. Chinese state media reports the two leaders also discussed tourism and customs cooperation. Xi wants to promote the construction of cross-border railway projects and port infrastructure. Xi also wants the two countries to expand defense exchanges and to jointly combat terrorism and extremism. In Chicago, protesters and officers from Immigration and Customs clashed outside a court where immigration proceedings are usually held. Protesters tried to prevent the masked officers from entering the court building. They also demanded that the officers remove their masks and show their badges. The immigration crackdown is part of President Trump's campaign promise, but the raids have sparked protests across America. The United Nations warns the humanitarian crisis in Haiti could worsen due to reduced aid funding. A report by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program blame conflict, economic shocks, and climate-related hazards for worsening conditions. Gang violence has also displaced thousands. 30% of Haitian children are acutely malnourished, as many families survive on one meal per day.
Over the next few months, we're very concerned about the reduction in humanitarian funding, which will lead to a decline in assistance. That means smaller rations and reduced numbers of people receiving much-needed humanitarian assistance in some of the world's most vulnerable countries.
We're taking a short break. You're watching Business Brief. Back on Business Brief, U.S. President Donald Trump's family business licensed its name to launch a mobile service and a $499 smartphone on Monday. Dubbed Trump Mobile, it's the latest deal brokered by the president's children to capitalize on his last name while he is in office. The new mobile venture will operate using the networks of the three major U.S. wireless carriers. But financial terms of the licensing deal were not disclosed. The announcement also promoted the launch of a sleek gold smartphone that will be designed and built in the United States. Philippine shares bounced back to positive territory in the second trading day of the week. The PSE index ended higher by nearly 0.2% to close at 63.69. Finishing the day as the fifth best performer in Asia. Among the sectoral indices, only financials ended in the red, with industrial rising the most at more than 1%. Advancers outpaced decliners 124 to 82. Total value turnover reached 5.9 billion pesos. More than half of the day's most active stocks ended in the green, with Manila Water rising the most at nearly 10%. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso is currently trading at 56.54 against the greenback, weakening from the previous close of 56.42. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.